Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The show is about to begin.
Talk about podcasts. Welcome to the Center for Technological Innovation and Entrepreneurship podcast. My name is Joana Madeira Pereira and I'll be your host. In this episode, we are going to talk about the COVID-19 crisis and the resilience of the Portuguese entrepreneurship ecosystem. Miguel Fontes has a deep knowledge of Portuguese startups ecosystem. Since 2016, he has been in charge of incubators that raised many projects with an international dimension. At Startup Lisboa, companies like Uniplaces, Codici, 360 Imprimir or All19 were dreamed up and built, and then crossed borders. And it is from this incubator that tech startups like Defined Crowd or Sensation are nowadays preparing themselves to conquer the world. Miguel Fontes is the CEO of Startup Lisboa, graduated in sociology and postgraduated in management, served as manager in several organizations such as ICEP or Santa Casa de Misericórdia. He was also Secretary of State of Youth and Sport. As a man that has a clear vision of the ecosystem, Miguel is going to talk about resilience, talent, risk, and opportunities ahead. Miguel, welcome and thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you.
Miguel, unfortunately, not many years ago, we experienced a crisis, and now here we are again, not knowing what awaits us in the post-pandemic future. As someone that knows the ecosystem, what message do you want to send to these hundreds, thousands of entrepreneurs in Portugal that suddenly face another crisis again?
Oh, tough question to start. Normally, I don't like to give a message or advice or that kind of stuff to anyone else, but let me say that it's really a difficult moment that we are facing now all together, but for sure for the entrepreneurs it's really a difficult one. And yes, normally when we speak about entrepreneurship, resilience, it's always a key word, and in this case it must be true. That means we know that in normal times to become entrepreneur, it's not something that it's possible for everyone, because it's oblige you to have some possibilities and some personal characteristics to face the challenge. And in that case, I would say it's even more clear that situation. That means that they really need to have that kind of resilience, because what we are living now, it's impossible to predict how it will be in the next future. But one thing we know already, in certain cases, of course, this is very diverse. It's not easy to do a characterization for all the situations, for all the startups, for all the entrepreneurs. The effects, we can talk about different kind of impacts regarding the sector, the maturity of the startups, and so on and so on. But for sure, this is hard times for everyone. So they really need to show that they can resist in these times, in these difficult times. And I just want to tell them that we are here for them, and we are working to do with this sentence not only nice words that can generate some comfortable word for them, but to be honest to you, we are working every single day in order to try to help them, to support them. But even for us, an incubator like Startup Lisboa, it's really difficult to do our job in this time for several reasons.
Mm-hmm. But do you think that the Portuguese entrepreneurship ecosystem is resilient enough to handle what is coming? Do you consider that it's prepared for this clash? Because right in the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis, we heard bad news, for example, from Babel. What to expect when we see these big startups, just having tough times as well?
As I told you, it's really difficult, in my opinion, to characterize this ecosystem like it will be something really unique, homogeneous, and so on. So it's really diverse, the different kinds of situations that we can see in this ecosystem. We can face different kind of challenge, but in general, I would say that the ecosystem, yes, is resilient, and we have a proof for that. It was unbelievable, and in the good sense, how fast and how strong it was, the reaction of what we call our ecosystem. If you take, for instance, in consideration tech for COVID, it was really amazing that just a few days after this pandemic situation, a few guys, completely organic, just with their initiative, they start a movement and they aggregate a lot of people to do a lot of projects. They did it in the real nice way because it was very inclusive. It was very well done, very well organized, and I was really surprised in a certain sense how agile they became and how it was possible in a few days, just in a few days, to put so many projects in so many different fields in action. So I must tell you that with that, only with that, it's more than possible to say that, of course, the ecosystem as a whole, it's resilient. Of course, saying that and knowing that, we must know that the impact, as I mentioned before, it's not the same for everyone. If you are a startup, if you are a founder of a startup working in the tourism field, of course, you are living hard days, much more than someone that is developing something that it's good for those who are at home working, and it's a productivity tool or something like that. So we can see different situations. What I see here from my position here at Startup Lisboa is we have a few projects that have been suffer a strong impact in their activities, and others, for instance, it was almost an opportunity for them to grow and to acquire more customers, to show the importance of the products or the solutions or the service that they were developing, and so on and so on.
Yes, because we observed a lot of talking about the opportunities for digitalization of the economy, right? So probably that's a sector that it's going to have huge opportunities in the future.
Yeah, and for instance, I can give you an example. We have a startup here called Doppio. It's a startup that is developing games in the gaming industry, games by voice. And they were working with platforms like Netflix and so on, and they increase a lot their activity in this pandemic situation. So, as I told you, it's a little bit different. It depends a lot of factors. Of course, it depends in which sector you are. But also depends about your maturity, in which phase of your project you are. So, of course, if you are a startup starting now and without investment and with weak teams in the sense that they are just starting, it's really, really difficult to resist in these moments, in these times. Of course, if you are a startup that have been invested already, if you have some resources, a lot of experience, you have in your board an advisory board, for instance, you have guys that can help you in these more difficult moments, and so on, it becomes completely different for those that are in this stage. So it's not. Once again, it's really difficult to characterize this situation only with one color. It's really different to the situation that you can find.
Okay. We always hear that a crisis is an opportunity. What is your opinion about this statement?
Normally, I really hate that kind of approach, and I can explain why. Of course, everyone can see opportunities in the crisis, in the sense that we just said before. Of course, if we are now working in this new normal from our homes and so on, digitalization and a huge opportunity, and it was a dynamic that accelerated a lot of projects, and in that sense we can say that it's an opportunity coming from this crisis. But in the sense that normally people say about when we are facing a crisis it's a huge opportunity, I don't like that, because in my perspective a crisis is always a bad thing, in the sense that it's something that reduces your energy, your muscle, your possibility, your energy to face the challenge that you have. And in that sense, it's a little bit tricky also, because it puts almost the responsibility of the situation that you are living when you are in troubles in yourself, in the sense that if you are not doing well, it's because of you, because of course you can see a lot of opportunities. So please be creative, please go away from your comfort zone and so on. I hate that kind of approach, because I don't think it's not honest at all, and normally it's really hard, and those who normally do this kind of approach, they are in a uncomfortable zone. To say this to other guys, but I saw so many people facing with struggles and so many difficulties. Imagine in cultural sector also, we saw a lot of people from the night to day
lose everything.
Everything, without any activity, without projects, without contracts, without perspectives. And it's not fair to say to someone that is in that position, oh, please, why don't you see here an opportunity? You just need to be creative, to reinvent yourself. I hate that. And I think it's really almost provocative and offensive to say that to someone. So, of course, knowing this and saying this, I must recognize that we had some opportunities, in the sense that, for instance, the pandemic situation that we are facing now, that situation did more for the digitalization of our societies than every kind of public policies and public efforts that we did in the past. So for sure that we can see this in that sense. But normally when someone uses that sentence, it's with this context, and in that case I don't like it.
Okay, thank you for your answer. So do you think that Portuguese entrepreneurs learned something from the last crisis, and what, if you think that they have learned?
They learned at least that they must be here thinking that they are here from themselves. That means that they can count, of course, with some support and so on, but they must count basically with themselves. That means that it's up to them to find the right tools, the right ways to go out of this situation. What I mean is, they know that when you are facing a huge crisis like this one, the resources, it's something really difficult to access them. And so you must be very aware of that, and knowing that it's up to you to find your path in these times. If you cannot count, let me say, you cannot expect that it will be someone else that will be in position to solve your own problems, and that's for sure. And that, when I'm saying this, I don't want to emphasize that this is a jungle and everyone is here only by himself or herself. No, what I mean is that we know that it's really difficult to expect that it will be a government or other kind of authorities, public or private, that will be here for you. It's up to you to find how to do it. And maybe that seems a little bit strange, just taking in consideration what I just said before. Mm-hmm. But I mean, people must be aware that, of course, others, they can support you, they can give you an extra help, but it's up to you. You must try to find in yourself the resilience, the energy, the conditions to perceive this journey. And in that sense, it's really unfair, it's really difficult, but I must be honest. If someone stays thinking, oh no, and that's why I don't like crisis, waiting for, oh, it's not fair what is happening to me. So for sure someone will be rescuing me for the situation, because what we are living now, it's not fair. Why? What I have done to deserve this situation? So you cannot face a moment like this one, that kind of mindset. Do you know what I mean? You must be aware that, no, it's up to you to find the right tools, the right energy to go on, to move on.
Mm-hmm. And well, knowing that the government, the European Union, and incubators like Startup Lisboa also have their role. So, as you said, they bring extra help to entrepreneurs. How can, government, European Union, and Startup Lisboa and other incubators can bring more resilience for the ecosystem?
Well, one thing I know, startups, they are no longer just a good idea or something sexy in the political speeches and so on. So it's part of our society. Mm-hmm. And in that sense, I hope that, for instance, the agreement that we saw last night to be achieved by the European Union, mm-hmm. that part of that big money that we will have in the next weeks, months, mm-hmm. part of that must be also for this part of our economy. So what I mean is, startups are part of the game, and exactly. Of course it will be, you cannot see our future without startups in your perspective, mm-hmm. because we can easily establish a connection between innovation and startups, between the dynamics economies and startups, and so on and so on. So that means that part of the public efforts that we need to do in order to solve this crisis, if you can say this, solve a crisis, must take in consideration this ecosystem, namely the founders, the startups, and of course, because they are more exposed to the effects of the crisis, because they are trying to prove new business models, new products, new service, and so on and so on. And we know from the books that when you have more innovation, you increase, of course, the risk of your activity. And I hope seriously that everyone be aware that part of these public efforts, namely financial efforts, must be oriented also to this ecosystem. And because we need every single day the startups, because part of the innovation that we see in our economies, in our societies, comes from startups. So it's impossible in these times. There are strange times that we are facing, that we see that, okay, we can do this without startups. No, we need them. And in that sense, I hope that in the national level and but also in the European level and international level, I hope to see more initiatives that I saw just now, for now.
Okay.
And because I really think that what this ecosystem did for our societies, for our economies, deserve already more attention from public entities. And until for now, so far, I must be honest to you, I'm a little bit disappointed because I think it was more than normal to expect to see more attention from public authorities, from the national government, namely, to this sector of activity. And what we saw, it's not in that sense. So let's see if with this new framework, a new perspective coming from this agreement established at the European level, that let's see if we can expect more ambition, more initiative, more support from the government to the startups.
Okay, because actually during these recent years, Portugal became well known for its entrepreneurship ecosystem.
Precisely.
As well for being a good place to invest, right? Web Summit, for instance, was a major high point in these last few years. So do you think that we will prevail better than in the last crisis? You know, after all this huge amount of work that has been done by some entities, just like Startup Lisboa, for instance?
I don't know. What I know is that we are dealing with the ecosystem that can be a paradox. Just before I told you that it was amazing to see how agile, how strong our ecosystem was in the reaction to this pandemic crisis. Okay, but knowing that, it's not a contradiction with what I want to reinforce. And what I want to reinforce is that it's also at the same time a fragile ecosystem in the sense that everything is new. And we are speaking about projects, about startups, about companies, about acceleration programs, incubators, co-work space investors, and so on and so on. In total, with less than 10 years. So, and it was really hard to build this ecosystem in a country like Portugal. So we have a big responsibility in our hands, and that's why I must tell you that I really hope that everybody is aware of that it's not possible to stay only seeing what is happening without doing anything in concrete to support this ecosystem.
Yes,
because it will take more than 10 years to rebuild an ecosystem like this one. And as you told me before in your question, yes, Portugal, and namely Lisbon, but Portugal in general, in the last few years was recognized by everyone as a good place to become entrepreneur, to build a startup, and so on and so on. So it's mandatory to know that, and with that perspective, to do our best in order to ourselves be also resilient, like the founders are. Okay, or they are.
Okay, because actually in the last few years, the political speech was that Portugal has the capacity to be Europe's nest of technological startups, right?
Yes.
So, in your opinion...
And I strongly believe on that. So that's the right moment now to prove it and to say, okay, now you can come, for those who are coming from abroad and for those that there are locals, to say, no, we are here for you. We know that what we are doing is very important for our societies, for our economy, and that's why we are here for you, to support you, and it's mandatory. I would say, if someone for any reason decide to do something different, a wrong political mistake. So I really hope that everyone is aware of that, and why? Because the most innovative companies, the most innovative projects that we saw in the last few years, they were born in this ecosystem. It's not normal in a country like Portugal to have so good companies like, for instance, Unbubble, because you mentioned Unbubble, but also Find Crowd, but also Feedzai, but also Farfetch, Indie Campers. I don't know. It's always
Many places.
difficult to mention startups because we forgot always to say a few. But I love to do this kind of analogy between the startups and soccer. It's a little bit the same. For a country like Portugal, it's really unbelievable, if we think, to have so many good players playing in international level like we have here in Portugal. That is normal when you are talking about big countries like Brazil. I'm speaking about soccer. If you just think about startups, is a little bit the same. It's normal to expect like a big country with all the conditions like United States to produce a lot of startups. It's normal. What it's more normal, if you want, it's unexpected, is to see a country like Portugal to have so many entrepreneurs, so many companies, so many startups. So that means something, and it means talent.
Okay, and that's the secret.
That's
talent.
The secret.
Okay.
Talent, for sure.
Okay.
We have good talent here in Portugal, for sure. Our educational institutions, they have a good level. If you think about engineers, managers, designers, and so on. And yes, everyone recognizes that we can find good talent here in Portugal. But more than that, I would say one of the ingredients is also the fact that you can attract talent from abroad. That means I don't say that it's only the locals that they have talent, and of course it's not that. But what I know is we have good local talent, and we have the right conditions to attract talent from abroad. And it's completely different when you speak with the CEO. Doesn't matter if it's CEO of a startup, of a big multinational company, they always share the same. When they have open positions in international level and they are trying to convince someone, a critical key resource in their companies, please move to this new position because we'll have a project in, I don't want to be impolite with someone, with no one, but imagine in the other countries in Europe, North Europe.
Okay.
It's much more difficult to have that capacity to attract people for those positions. When you say, we'll do this project in our company based in Lisbon, are you available to move? And of course, it's clear the answer. Okay. When I should go, when I should move, and that's something that we must also be aware of. That we have a very nice society in the sense that we don't have conflicts, ethnical conflicts, social conflicts. It's a really cosmopolitan environment already, with a very good infrastructure of talent, but also of
communications.
In terms of technology, net, and so on, and with a very good cultural life already that you can experience here in. If you put on top of that our natural conditions, if you want, our weather, our atmosphere, and so on, it's really amazing. And that's why there are so many people moving to Portugal and to Lisbon, and they decide why not, and Lisbon is the right place to be. And this is a asset for a country like Portugal. So it's really mandatory to know that.
Okay.
And because it's not at all possible, it's not easy at all to try to be competitive in the international level without that capacity to attract innovative projects, innovative people to come to live here and work and invest in Portugal.
Okay, so we have a lot of advantages, like you said, like quality of life, talent, infrastructures, etc. But in terms of financing or finding investors, what would you say about the Portuguese ecosystem?
It's changing in the right direction, but I must be honest to you, it's still probably one of the weaknesses of our ecosystems, because we don't have the same amount of money and investors that we can find in other geographies. Yeah. That's for sure. But it's changing. And what we can see is the fact that for instance, Web Summit brings a lot of international attention to Portugal, and also brings a lot of attention from international investors, for international VCs. And they are now discovering that here they can find a very good deal flow where they can invest, where they can find good projects, good founders, and so on and so on. So it's changing, but of course when you do a comparison with other cities, it's not the obvious place where you should be if the question is to attract an investor. But what we know for these last 8 years is the fact that it's not critical, because if you have a good project, if you have a good product, a good startup, you can establish yourself here. You can do all the work from Lisbon, for instance, and to try to find investment abroad. And that's the story, if you want, that it's behind all the good startups that we have here. And it was even more like that in the past. Now we have already a few investors coming, and also we have more local investors here in Portugal. But when they need to grow, they know, and they know how to do it, and they know that they need to go away and try to get the attention of the good investors. And to be honest, they are not here, of course.
Okay, so the previous crisis showed a general lack of money. Also now companies are again dealing with cash problems, and certainly for venture investors, this will be a time of retraction in investments. What makes investor, in your opinion, in these circumstances, during a crisis, decide to invest in a startup?
Once again, it's really difficult to characterize this situation only with one color. Let me say, you have different approach from different profile of investors also. What I saw is we have some investors, they just decide, okay, our priority, our main goal is to protect our portfolio, and that means they are more conservative now, and they don't want to invest in new business because they have a kind of the perspective is my compromise is with my portfolio. I must be here and to have my resource aligned for those that are already part of my portfolio. But at the same time, we see other investors looking for good opportunities to invest in new projects and new startups, and both theses exist. And so once again, as I told you, it's not very easy to characterize this in one or another direction. What we have is both realities in parallel, if you want.
You already told that you don't like to give advices, but what message, again, would you give to an entrepreneur that wants to launch his startup nowadays in this so unpredictable and risky context? Because, when we think about the last crisis, we see Fidzai, for instance, or Uniplaces also, as startups that were born during the crisis. So what advice would you give to this entrepreneur?
As you told, I don't like to give advice, so I don't want to call it an advice, but I would say for sure that my opinion about it is that if you want to launch a new project, a new startup, you must want it. It's the first thing. The second one is you must be aware if you can or not to do it, if you have the resources to do that. And when I mean resources, of course, I'm talking about financial resources, but it's more than this. That means you need to ask yourself, do I have what I need to do this? And that means also the knowledge. Do I have the knowledge to do this project in these times? And these three questions, it's not different now that it was, in my perspective, before this pandemic crisis. Mm-hmm. Before someone decides to build a project, a startup, I think that person should ask and look inside and see, do I want this for my life, for my personal life? And must be aware what obliged to become an entrepreneur. And sometimes I don't like this also. People, they try to emphasize a sexy way of living, saying, oh, it's so nice to be a kind of new rock star, to be an entrepreneur. And it's not the right way to describe the entrepreneurial life. So that means when you become an entrepreneur, you must be aware that what you have in face of you for the next month, years, it's hard times. With pandemic or without pandemic crisis, it's always the same. So you must be aware. Do I want this for my personal life? Okay. If I want it, go away. I'm here, and I will be the first one to clap my hands and say, go. But the second question is do I have the resources to do this? Do I have the knowledge? And sometimes what I see is people to be a little bit naive about it. Imagine with a very simple example, someone that wants to solve a problem in the industry, for that you need to build something on top of artificial intelligence or machine learning and so on. And when you ask to that person, but you are the right guy for that, you know the market, or you have the resources in terms of knowledge about the technology that you want to use to solve the problem. Oh, no. So it's not a question. It's not only a question that I want to be an entrepreneur. Okay. You must be aware that the good entrepreneurs that I know, of course, they really want. It's the first thing, but they need to know a little bit more about the market, about the technology that they are thinking to use, and so on and so on. That means that it's not an easy way for yourself. So and when I'm saying this, sometimes I know that people criticize me, saying, oh, but you should be in position to create more motivation to people to become entrepreneur. And of course I want to have more entrepreneurs, and I want that that people can feel, okay, why not to become entrepreneur? But I just want, or I also want that they can be aware of what they can expect when they decide to do it. And of course, it's not a big deal, because they will learn by themselves when they will try to do the first project. And when they will do the first project, they will discover a lot of the things that challenge that I'm trying to emphasize now, and they will do the second if they have the resilience that we start these conversations speaking about resilience, they will see by themselves if they have this resilience or not. And if they have, they will do the second one, the third one, and so on and so on. If not, it's also a learning that they'll achieve from their lives, and it's not a big deal.
Okay, and what do you have to say to those that say that Portuguese entrepreneurs are too afraid of risk?
I don't think that it's no longer true to say that, to be honest. What I think we can say, if you want to generalize a little bit, is sometimes what I see is that Portuguese, they don't believe like they should do in terms of their capacities, in terms of ambition, if you want.
Okay.
They try to do a project, and it's a cultural issue because they were born and they grow up always listening that, oh, please be realistic. Oh, please, you cannot dream so much. You must be aware that we are from a small country in the corner of Europe, and so on and so on. And it's a question of ambition. And I, in a daily basis, I try to fight against that, saying no, if you have a new product, and you show already that it works and it's a good solution here and also in London or in Paris or in Berlin, why are you thinking only to do this only for Portugal or Spain? No. You must be ambitious and to try to do this in the global scale, if you want. And that is the nature of an entrepreneur, of a startup. Startups, it's always something related with general solution, general markets, and not only local markets. The big difference, in my perspective, between a startup and a small medium company, it's of course the fact that SME company, it can be only focused in the local and the domestic market. When you are talking about a startup, I would say it's natural to think about a global solution, because if you found a new way to do something differently and you are in the possession of a new technology, a new business model, it doesn't matter, you are almost obliged to do this in the global scale, if you want. So that's my perspective. So they need to have more ambition, for sure.
Okay, ambition and resilience for this reality that we are facing now. So, Miguel, thank you very much for being here with us. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It was a little bit boring, I would say, our conversation, but it's difficult. No. For someone like me, that I like to touch everyone, I like to see people, I like to be much more natural. It's really hard to speak through a platform like this one, or someone doesn't matter the platform, but it's something that I'm trying to learn to deal with, and it's always a challenge also for me to do this not in a room with person in front of you, but doing this in a digital way. So
yes, exactly. So you are facing also the challenge of
for sure,
right? Okay, Miguel, thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
In this episode, Miguel Fontes highlighted the relevance of startups in the digital transformation and in the economic recovery process that Portugal has ahead. Miguel pointed out that in this period of crisis, when European funds are part of the solution, the Portuguese government must assure that the ecosystem has access to strong financial help. Otherwise, what was built in the last years may get lost. For the CEO of Startup Lisboa, the moment is hard for everyone. If being an entrepreneur is never easy, now it's even harder, and resilience must be more than a word. Miguel doesn't like to give advice, but he shares his thoughts about the challenges of launching a project in a time of crisis.
talk about podcasts.